Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, John and Lee proudly present the greatest wrestling show ever!
Okay guys, welcome to episode 5 of the greatest wrestling tournament ever. We're into the 4th match now, and I think it's going to be the first one of this series that's going to be an absolute cracker. It is Kurt Angle defending against Brock Lesnar from WrestleMania 19 in 2003. Now Lee, have you seen this match?
No, I haven't. I'm really looking forward to it.
Have you seen much Kurt Angle? Because you kind of missed Kurt Angle, really, didn't you?
Yeah, I've seen bits and bobs on.
You've seen him against Baron Corbin in his retirement match. Anything else? Or is that as far as you're aware Kurt Angle goes?
No, he came up on when I did a similar thing with Harry last year, towards the end of last year. I think he featured a couple of times in that.
Okay. So you've seen a better match than the Baron Corbin one.
That's a better match than the Baron Corbin match, yes.
I've got to be honest with you, like, whilst a part of me is all for, you know, retiring wrestlers going out on their back, putting people over. I like that. Baron Corbin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then it just like, it didn't even do anything for him either as well. In theory, like, beating Kurt Angle in his retirement match should make someone. Whereas, if anything, it made me like him even less, and not in a heel heat, I want to see him get beat by someone else, more in a, I really wish he'd just go away sort of way.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, it's a bit of a disrespect there to Kurt Angle, I reckon.
But no, I'm fine with that. I'm completely fine with people being, you know, going out on their backs, putting people over. You know, 30 years ago, if, I don't know, Harley Race was in his retirement match, I'd expect him to put over...
No, I didn't mean that. I meant the opponent.
Oh, the opponent. Yeah. I think Angle himself wasn't overly happy with it. I think he was hoping for a Brock or maybe like an Austin or someone, or, you know. But yeah, Baron Corbin. Anyway. But on the plus side, what we're about to see is a considerably better match. A match that I think is often forgotten for its quality because of what happens at the end, which I know you know, it's Lesnar landing on his face from the shooting star press. That's what people commonly remember. I seem to remember, both from watching it at the time and from reviews and what have you, that it's a really good match as well. Again, overshadowed by the finish, but we're going to get into it. So it's WrestleMania 19, March 30th, 2003 on the WWE Network. We are 3 hours and 15 minutes, 35 seconds into the pay-per-view. 3, 2, 1, let's go. So Angle's music is playing. Angle's got some of the best music in wrestling, I think. Instantly identifiable as him.
Yeah, it has got kind of that Olympic undertone to it, hasn't it?
Do you know who had this music before Kurt Angle?
No.
The Patriot. Do you know who the Patriot is?
No.
Right. So the Patriot had a fairly successful career, I think, working in All Japan and was it the Global Wrestling Federation in the early 90s. And then he came into WWF as was briefly in 97. He faced Bret Hart for the world title at In Your House Ground Zero, the same night that Undertaker and Shawn Michaels had their first match. The month before, they had the rematch in Hell in a Cell. At the same pay-per-view as that first Hell in a Cell, he was in a tag team capture the flag match, I think it was. I think if I remember correctly, was it him and Vader against Bret and possibly the Bulldog, I think it was. And then I think he did a handful more months in WWF and then soon disappeared, but he used to come out to what is mostly known as Kurt Angle's music.
Wow.
Fun fact for you there.
So does that happen much then? Just the music getting recycled?
I think so. I think if it's not been too closely associated with a big act, I think if you've got some quality music like that is, and people aren't just going to think of it as the previous person's. You know, you couldn't reuse Real American Hogan's entrance music. You couldn't reuse Brock Lesnar's music because people identify it with them. But I think there have been other ones that have been come up with. Guess who used Real American before Hogan did?
Go on.
The US Express. Mike Rotunda and Barry Windham used to come out to the Real American. Real American and all that. Before Hogan took it, I don't know if he just said that he wanted it and pinched it off them, or they changed music first. I'm not quite sure, but apparently they did use that music first.
Wow.
So going into this match, Angle's actually got a fairly severe neck injury. Now, up until just before the match, only weeks before, if that, they were unsure if the match was going to take place. I remember at the time there'd been a lot of talk on social media or just lots of the internet back then as was, that Angle wasn't going to be able to defend the match. It looked like he was going to drop it to Lesnar on SmackDown, I want to say like 8 or 9 days before WrestleMania, and that was the talk. He was going to drop it in a quick match. And they did a bit of a bait and switch. They had the match announced. They had Lesnar come out and seemingly F5 and pin Angle. But it turned out it was Kurt's brother, Eric, who looks somewhat similar build, wearing Angle's jacket, the one that he just had on for the entrance. So when Lesnar realised, he sort of stepped away from the pin. Everyone wondered why he'd stopped pinning Angle, because he seemed to have got the match won. And then Kurt, I believe, did he run in and roll him up or something, therefore retaining the world title and retaining this WrestleMania main event. But he's coming into this match with a very severe injury, Angle is.
How young Lesnar looks.
How big did you say?
Young.
Young, yeah. Well, he's very young there. So let's think about this. I think he's only about a couple of years older than us. So this is 2003, early. So let's say it's before his birthday. He could still be about 25, I reckon. Roughly. 26, maybe. Hang on. I think he was 25 when he won the world title, previous SummerSlam, so he could still be 25. Yeah, it might have been 26, depending on when his birthday is. But yeah, he is young. He was identified early on, Lesnar. He won the NCAAs, which I don't really understand it, but some sort of collegiate wrestling tournament in America. And I think Jim Ross and sort of guys scouted him with the intention of coming in. And I think straight from day one, he was on a hefty contract. I seem to remember him getting paid $250,000 a year while in developmental, while everyone else was getting paid $500 a week or whatever they were on.
Wow, that's huge.
But you can see why. You know, you've got a guy like that. He's quite a once-in-a-generation sort of athlete, as they refer to him.
Yeah, and a genuine tough guy as well.
And I think having that background as well, like on top of his actual physicality and all that, means that you've got a bit of a storyline to tell already. They were probably thinking about potential matchups with Angle right from the start, I would assume. I think he was signed in summer 2000, by which point Angle was a main eventer in WWE. By the time he came onto TV the night after WrestleMania the year before this, Angle's obviously a well-established, consistent main eventer. You've got to assume that they had some level of expectation that they might work towards this.
That makes sense, yeah.
A few times over the years, Angle has proclaimed that he intends to enter UFC. Not sure. I think it was many years after he'd stand much of a chance of doing anything. He's obviously a tough guy, and winning Olympic gold in '96, he's a phenomenal wrestler. But whether 15 years later, with repeated broken bones and neck and surgeries, he would have stood any chance against an MMA fighter, I think is unlikely, shall we say.
It would have been worth watching.
It would have been, yeah. He might have done better than CM Punk did in his UFC fights.
So how did this match come about? Was it a Royal Rumble result or something else?
Yeah, so Lesnar won the Rumble that year, taking a rewind to before that. So Lesnar debuts the night after WrestleMania 18. He goes on to smash through a number of opponents. He wins King of the Ring that June-ish time with... Now, I don't know if they'd announced before that the winner would face the world champion at SummerSlam, or if that's just what ended up happening, but he faced The Rock for the world title, the unified world title it was at that point, just one belt, well, two belts, one owner, at SummerSlam 2002, in what was very much a changing of the guard. Whilst The Rock was still fairly young, he'd only been around for a handful of years, he was the established main eventer, and brand new potential superstar Lesnar, being put over strong over The Rock, was very much a proclamation that this guy is the future. He holds the title till Survivor Series 2002, when, of all people, The Big Show beats him. The Big Show, and wasn't even in Big Show in a particularly good phase. He was wearing like a singlet covered by a pair of crappy-looking trousers. I don't think anyone for a second thought that he stood any chance of winning. But then Paul Heyman, who was managing Brock, turned on Brock, allowing Big Show to win. Big Show then loses the title the next month at... I want to say it's Armageddon. I might be wrong with the title of the pay-per-view. So that's about December 2002. Clearly, they're just taking it off Lesnar to build towards this. They wanted it on Angle, but didn't want to give away the Lesnar-Angle match to get there.
Yeah.
Lesnar then wins Royal Rumble to then main event. I mean, that's a hell of a debut year. So in his first calendar year, well, not calendar, sorry, his first year in the business in main WWE, he wins King of the Ring, wins the world title, he wins the Royal Rumble, and then main events his first WrestleMania.
Incredible.
You can fully understand why Vince was pissed off only 1 year later when Lesnar decided he'd had enough and wanted to go and play American football. Yeah, I think Lesnar was never a fan of the business. He never particularly wanted to be a wrestler. It was always just a job for him, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But when he wasn't enjoying it and when he felt he'd made an amount of money and he had value elsewhere, you can see why you might want to explore that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's but I mean, just going back to that first year that he had there, I mean, it's completely warranted, isn't it?
Yeah,
He's an absolute superstar. Just even looking at him, he's the kind of wrestler you just want to watch.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. You can see why they saw a lot in him, and even just the quality of his work. I mean, right from day one in OVW, supposedly he just got it in the same way that Kurt Angle did. You know, Angle was on WWE TV after only a handful of months of training. He was world champion in his debut year as well. He debuted at Survivor Series 99 and won the title, also from The Rock, funnily enough, 11 months later at, I want to say No Mercy, I think it was, in 2000. So both of them winning the titles in their first year. Do you know who the quickest ever WWE debut to world champion is?
Is it guessable?
Yeah, I mean, it's someone who's currently on TV. He's had a number of world championships. It's not particularly obvious if you weren't watching at the time.
Daniel Bryan.
No, Sheamus.
Oh, okay.
So Sheamus debuted on ECW, which was WWE's third brand, in I want to say like autumn, September-ish, 2009. Having only lost to me about 2 years earlier. I like to think I put him on that path. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he won. It was called something like a Fresh Chance or New Start, New something, New Beginnings Battle Royal. One episode of Raw or SmackDown when he was fairly unknown to face John Cena for whichever world title that was at the TLC pay-per-view in December 2009, and shockingly beat Cena when Cena kind of jumped off the ropes to a table. It was a slightly mistimed spot. It was obviously supposed to be more of Sheamus putting him through the table, but it did just look like Cena had jumped through it. I think the intention was there to put Sheamus in a position like that without Cena having to do a conventional job. He didn't get pinned by Sheamus.
Yeah.
With only 3 months of being on TV, Sheamus was the world champion pretty much out of nowhere.
It's incredible.
It was a big night that for British, or whatever you want to call it, wrestling, because that same night Drew McIntyre won his first Intercontinental Champion. So having not really had much in the way of British success for a while, you'd had Regal for the rest of that decade. You'd had Davey Boy the previous decade. All of a sudden on the same night you have, I don't know, Irish isn't British, whatever you call it, British Isles, whatever it is. Yeah. You have two champions from this end of the woods, the two of the main championships as well. They went through quite an expansion in terms of the variety of places they signed people from in the mid-noughties. So on the same night in, I think it's April 2007, that they sign Sheamus and Drew McIntyre. They also signed Wade Barrett, Haid Vanson, a good friend of mine, Tommy and, what was his name? Tommy and somebody else. A couple of lads that I knew from Leeds, and a guy called Rob Terry. Now, if you want to see a physique, if you think Brock Lesnar looks good, Google Rob Terry. Rob Terry has got one of the best physiques you will ever see. So he was entirely off the back of his physique, looked absolutely phenomenal, world-class physique, but ultimately wasn't very good. He didn't make it as far as TV. He was signed a few years later by TNA, around the time that Hogan and Bischoff came in and took over control. And I think Hogan saw massive potential in him because of the way he looked. I seem to remember they put some sort of title on him. I think it might have been called the Global Championship around that time. But unfortunately, he couldn't work all that well.
Right.
I found a picture of him. Rob. So Rob was Welsh anyway. So they signed 7 British and Irish guys all that same night, and around the same time they started signing people from different places in Europe, a much wider variety of places than they'd previously signed for, where the vast majority of their superstars come from North America.
Looks like a bodybuilder.
Oh, he is, yeah, phenomenal. Like, it looks like a world-class bodybuilder, not just any old bodybuilder. Yeah. You can see
professional bodybuilding.
Say again?
Did he do professional bodybuilding? Did you say?
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he did bodybuilding competitions. As to whether or not it's professional, as in it's your only source of income, I don't necessarily know. Probably could have done. There's another similar one a couple of years later, another Welsh guy actually called Barry Griffiths, again a friend of mine. He did make it as far as TV. Barry looked phenomenal. He looked a bit like Batista, but younger, more athletic looking Batista. It looked amazing. Got signed. The urban legend is that the tryouts, this would have been in about 2008 or 9, and Barry takes his shirt off, and John Laurinaitis just says, right, let's sign him. Because someone that looks like Barry or Rob Terry, you stand the chance of getting them to work at the level you want. Someone who is a great worker but looks like shit,
yeah,
you're probably not going to get them where...
That's it, yeah. No, I can imagine. Do you want to have a go at some cage match trivia?
Yes.
All right, we'll start with Brock then. So out of 10, what do you think his popularity rating is?
Oh, I'm a bit confused with this one. So it's popularity as opposed to average match rating, isn't it? Is that what
it's called, I looked at that, it's called the popularity rating. So
7.2.
8.06.
Okay, that's relatively close compared to some of them.
And how many matches do you think he's got per cage matches?
Now, it won't be a massive amount because he spent a couple of years in OVW, of which the majority will be on there. He then spent 2 years full-time in WWE. And then whilst he's been back in WWE for 9 years now, it's on a very light schedule of between probably 2 and maybe, 5 to 10 per year. So I'm guessing it'll still be in the hundreds. I think it's going to be under 1,000. 600.
419.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. A couple of years at 150 a year, and then 5, 10 a year for approaching 10 years, roughly.
It was 73% win rate.
So
I actually thought it'd be higher. So we've seen some much higher than that, and Brock Lesnar I've not often seen him lose.
No, but within that, you've got things like Royal Rumbles that they didn't win. You've got Survivor Series matches, tag matches, etc. on the losing side of. So as to how many of those matches he's been pinned by an opponent, I'd be interested to see.
Yeah.
It'll be an amount. And actually, when you think about it as well, for the last 10 years, his win-loss record hasn't been all that amazing. Because whilst he's had long periods of being the world champion, he's only defended it, say, 4 or 5 times a year. And he's then lost it to a Roman Reigns, a Seth Rollins. I remember him losing to Triple H. In amongst those matches, there'll be a reasonable number of pinfall losses. I think he's always happy to do business, Brock is. If you pay him the right amount and it makes sense, he'll happily put anyone over.
Do you want to have a go? Is top 5 most sport opponents?
So, Angle in there, maybe?
Number 2?
Yeah. I'm guessing it's people from that period of 2002 to 2004.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go left field. In Royal Rumble 2004, he defended the world title against, of all people, Bob Hardcore Holly. So maybe they had a number of shaking the head. Not Bob Holly.
All very well known.
Okay.
One of them was mentioned already.
The Rock?
No.
Triple H?
No.
Roman Reigns?
No.
Seth Rollins? I'm doing bad here. I'm getting worse week by week. Thinking back from back then. Big Show
is number 1.
Yeah, I've had a few different matches. I remember him having what do you call it? A stretcher match against Big Show where Big Show got put on like a forklift truck thing to get him out of there.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's that world title match. I think they had a match a few years ago since Lesnar has been back, possibly one of the specials from Japan. Okay, right, fair enough. Who else is in there?
Well, the other 3, I'll give you a couple of guesses. 2 of the biggest legends in WWE, and he who must not be named.
Benoit
is number 5.
Yeah. Biggest legends. Eddie Guerrero.
No.
Who haven't I said?
I'm talking
I mean,
massive legend.
I mean, there's people like Hogan, but he's only wrestled Hogan once or twice. Austin? No, he's not wrestled Austin, has he? Massive legend. I don't know. Who is it?
John Cena, number 4.
Oh, yeah, makes sense, yeah.
And number 3 is Undertaker.
Again, pretty obvious, yeah. In fact, I'm surprised Undertaker's not higher than that. I should really have got that. He ended the streak at WrestleMania 30. They had definitely a Hell in the Cell match in this latest run. They had a Hell in the Cell match in 2002, I think it was, after he first won the title. Or was it 2003 when he'd regained it? I think possibly in 2003, yeah. I should have got that.
It's one of them when somebody hasn't got that many matches, the top 5 isn't really that. Like Chris Benoit's number 5, and he only fought him 20 times.
Can't say Chris Benoit that many times, honestly. Dear me.
And he's got 4 nicknames that he's generally gone by or goes by.
Okay.
All 4.
The Beast Incarnate.
Yeah.
Just the Beast.
Yeah.
The Next Big Thing.
Yeah.
And is it one that's used on main TV that you're aware of?
No. This is the one I wouldn't have got.
Okay, so I'm guessing from his days in OVW, he was in the Minnesota Wrecking Crew with Shelton Benjamin. Don't know, pass.
The Conqueror.
That was after he ended the streak against The Undertaker. Yeah, no, I do vaguely remember that. I don't think it was necessarily a massively long-term thing, but he was referred to that as on a number of occasions.
All right, let's jump into Kurt Angle then.
Right.
What do you think his ranking is out of 10?
It's got to be high. 8.5.
9.43.
Wow.
He's one of the top rated ever.
Everyone likes Angle. I think everyone rates him. There's people who will be perhaps blind to Lesnar's qualities because they don't like him. They don't like him being an absent champion, etc. But I think everyone likes and rates Angle.
Yeah. And how many matches do you think he's got?
Okay, so it'd be a fair amount because he's had 20 years with minimal time off for injuries. He's been in TNA for over a decade of that, but they've run a reasonable schedule, not quite as much as WWE do. So let's say 20 years averaging, let's say 100 matches a year, 2,000.
It's not too bad. 1,543.
Okay.
51.6% win rate.
Interesting.
Do you want to have a go at his top 5?
Benoit?
No.
Edge?
Number 4, yeah.
AJ Styles?
Number 3, well done.
Samoa Joe?
No. Two of them he's got in common with Brock Lesnar.
The Rock? No, we didn't say it. Big Show?
Number 2.
Undertaker?
No.
Who else did we say for Lesnar? Oh, hello, Lesnar's. Oh, that was close. Kick out there. Angle was always good at ridiculously close kick outs. Like, if I hadn't known what the finish was, I would have thought that was a pin. Because he doesn't even start to, sometimes you can see they're starting to move their legs to get a full body kick out. Angle there, the referee's hand was inches away from the ground before any part of him started to move, and he just quickly lifted his shoulder just an inch off the ground. Always made it look relatively real, Angle did. There's other wrestlers who, like Shawn Michaels, I love Shawn Michaels, but it never looked like he was actually in a fight, did it?
Yes.
Yeah, he's a fantastic wrestler and an entertainer, and I'm not in any way besmirching him, but Angle really looked like he was in a fight. He really looked like he was hurting his opponent was hurting him. Right, who's left in Angle's top 5? Pass, who is it?
Number 5 was Chris Jericho.
Okay.
Number 1 was John Cena.
Yeah, makes sense. So this WrestleMania that they're wrestling at, WrestleMania 19, I think is arguably one of the most underrated WrestleManias. Now, I don't think many people would put it in their shout for one of the best WrestleMania there's ever. I think most people, if they're going from that period, would go for WrestleMania 17 2 years before, which I'm not going to say is or isn't better. On this one, you've got this. You've got Austin and Rock in their final match earlier on in the night, which probably wasn't as good as their previous 2, but it was a big match, and it was Austin's final ever match. Arguably Rock's last one as a somewhat full time, and that's basically he faced Goldberg the following month, and then did one more match the following WrestleMania, and then was gone for several years. You've got Hogan versus Vince McMahon, 20 years in the making. That was not a quality match in terms of the wrestling, but it was entertaining. I'm sure there's some other stuff on there, but I remember it being a good all-round WrestleMania. I think there might have been something like a Benoit or Guerrero match. I think John Cena pins the Big Show for his first title in WWE, the US title. No, sorry, that's the following year, WrestleMania 20. Ignore me on that one.
Team Angle.
Team Angle are on earlier in this, are they? In a tag title match?
Yeah, that's right.
Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas. Shelton Benjamin's still there nearly 2 decades later. Doesn't look all that much older than he did 20 years ago.
Triple H and Booker T, was that a good match?
Well, my main recollection of it from the time was the internet wrestling communities. There we go, it's going up now. Let's just watch this. So Lesnar had done the shooting star press numerous times in developmental in Ohio Valley Wrestling, and people were fully aware that it was something that he could do. I think I'd seen some sort of downloaded from kazoo.com. Here he goes, shooting star press. Oh! So he'd done it many times before in OVW. I think the big difference was he was fresh and, he just did it, or at the end of maybe like a 2-minute match rather than a 20-minute match. And probably not as sweaty and as slippy. And it's the end of the night. There's been several other matches in there. The conditions aren't necessarily ideal for being a 300-pound man doing something like that off the top rope. You've got to be impressed by the speed and response from Angle. So he starts to move as Lesnar's landing. He's supposed to take the move. He obviously realises it's coming short, so he moves to one side to make it look a little bit like it's rolled out of the way. F5, there we go for the pin. He then pins Lesnar, so he's not just stood there looking a bit. I remember, for example, when Owen Hart gave Steve Austin the sit-out tombstone and essentially broke his neck. Now, obviously, you're not going to start picking him up, but Owen did look a little bit lost, a little bit unsure as to what to do. Angle there, to me, covers that well in that he makes it look like the match was continuing perhaps as well as you possibly could.
Yeah. There we go.
It's funny, actually, coming out of this WrestleMania, going into it, you've got Austin, you've got Rock, you've got Angle, you've got Lesnar, you've got Hogan, but then all of a sudden, you're losing Austin, you're about to lose Rock a month later, you've got Angle, you don't know where he stands with his neck, you've got Lesnar just about killing himself, in and out anyway, so there's a lot of potential for the landscape to change very quickly after WrestleMania 19.
Did they take a downturn after they all left?
Yeah, I think they were definitely rebuilding at that point. So you'd got the likes of Cena and Orton and Batista coming through. I mean, they're nowhere near the main event scene at this point, but they're potentially seen as stars of the future. So they are rebuilding at this point. I can't remember any specifics about business. I mean, I remember in general business in the mid-noughties not being what it was in the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
I mean, you've lost a lot of big stars there. You could argue that around this time, they've probably got some of the best collection of stars they've ever got. They've still got Hogan, they've still got Hall and Nash, fair enough, very much at the tail end of their actual drawing careers, but they're still at the tail end of it, not several years past it. You've got quite a selection of talent on WrestleMania 19 compared to some others. He doesn't look well, Lesnar, does he? There was a documentary that came out after this WrestleMania, the sort of one that comes out after nearly every pay-per-view now. You've got the day of Survivor Series or the day of WrestleManias appear on the WWE network nowadays.
Yeah. They
did one at the time called the Mania of WrestleMania. So it was, I think, relatively unheard of behind-the-scenes look at the build-up to and production of this WrestleMania, and as part of it, they show Lesnar going backstage after the match, and he's all over the place. He's like an angry bear. He's lashing out at people. He's confused. He's dazed. But what was going to happen? Oh, also in this one, you had Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho earlier in the night as well. I remember that now.
Oh, I know it's someone.
Speaking of Chris Jericho, he is on our list of potential and people for the next episode. So, could we put a little? We probably need to make sure we get people like, Mr. Perfect's going to be quite difficult to get in there, isn't he? Who's he actually faced on that list, Mr. Perfect?
Roddy Piper.
You kind of feel he would do because they're of the same generation. He's probably the only one, really, isn't he? Mr. Perfect. Maybe Sting in WCW. I think we'll have to be a bit TBC on that. We'll try and get Mr. Perfect match in for next week. I can't guarantee who it's going to be with. I'm reasonably sure he will have faced Roddy Piper. Whether or not it's on a match we can get hold of or is particularly worth watching, we'll have to wait and see. But let's provisionally say we've got Mr. Perfect in for next week's episode. And you've got Kurt Angle there has gone through to the next round. Not Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
Yet again, I don't think we talked about the match in the slightest, did we? Apart from the shooting star press at the end. Good match, though.
Yes, it was.
Awesome, guys. Hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you next week for a Mr. Perfect match, hopefully.